Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. November 12th, 2020 at 6:02, Board of Selectmen's call to order. I'm going to go ahead and take a roll call. Sheila?
Here.
Pat?
Here.
Ed?
Here.
And Mike?
Here.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the virtual Board of Selectmen meeting. We are using the Zoom conferencing format. The webinar ID is 988-5370-1957. If you wish to make a public comment and speak on an agenda item, please use the raise your hand feature on your device. The moderator will be notified and will unmute you. Please identify yourself before making a comment. Item 2, approve the, we can go ahead and do all 4 of these, I believe.
No, I wasn't at one.
You weren't there? Okay, well, I'll take one at a time then. Approve the October 22nd Selectmen's meeting.
So move.
Second.
First and a second. Ed?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Sheila?
I was not there.
Okay, and Alan says aye, motion carries. Approve the October 26th. Motion.
So moved.
First,
Second.
Sheila?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Alan says aye, motion carries. October 29th Selectmen's meeting. Sheila? I have to have a motion.
So move.
Second.
First and second, Sheila?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
Ed?
Pat, you weren't there.
Aye.
Weren't there?
Wasn't?
No, Pat and Ed, October 29th.
Oh, that's right, you weren't there.
I wasn't there?
No,
That was the one where we just did the warrant,
Oh, yeah, I was
Right.
fishing. You're right.
and you were
Yep.
fishing, and Pat, you had problems getting into that meeting, remember?
Right.
So Mike, you were here,
I was aye.
okay? And I was here. Motion carries,
it was just
okay.
3 of us. Yep.
Right. Item 3, public forum. This is an opportunity for anyone who wants to address the Board of Selectmen with any issue that is not on the agenda. If there's anybody out there in audience land, raise your hand.
I see no hands raised for general comments.
Okay. Approve the 2022 budget schedule. Your packet.
Problem with
Lori,
it.
you want to say anything with that?
Yeah, Mike noted that on the March 11th meeting, at the end, it says regular Board of Selectmen meeting to follow, and then it says at 6 PM. It shouldn't say at 6, because we can't have a budget meeting and a Selectmen's meeting at the same time. So we'll fix that, but otherwise,
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, fine.
That's good.
I'm fine with it too. So, how about a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a first and a second. Take a roll call. Sheila,
Approved. Aye.
Pat,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Alan says aye, motion carries.
And that schedule is available on the website, so if anybody's interested.
Item 5, discuss climate change goals. Or you want to talk a little bit
Yep.
about?
Yep, I was just making a note about the budget committee. So at your last meeting, we did discuss the climate change goals, and you guys wanted an opportunity to review them a little further, and so we put them back on the agenda for your discussion tonight.
Well, I'd like to see us tonight go ahead and approve the climate change goals, this list.
I had a suggestion though, if I could,
Yeah,
brief. It's a great, the goals are great, there's no question, but on number 1, where we say develop a local climate action plan by the Board of Selectmen, I know we've got COVID and we've got the village parcel and we've got all kinds of different things going on. But if this is going to be successful, we need to develop an action plan. And I'm wondering if we need to, at some point, think about setting a date for when the selectmen are going to have a skeleton action plan available. It says that it's the responsibility of the selectmen to set that. The second thing is an observation just to think about, is that I went down through all of these education and outreach thing, and the Kennebunkport Climate Initiative and the Conservation Commission have 9 assignments. And, you know, I remember when we were doing the conservation, not the conservation, the comprehensive plan, that we had an awful lot of people assigned to a lot of things. And when the way I look at it is the goals are terrific, but we got to live in a place of reality as far as who can accomplish what. And I just think, I'm not asking to do anything tonight, but I'm thinking we really ought to take a look at it at some point in time and just say what we need to really do is to say,
Just ask me for a WPA.
what can realistically be done by the number of people who are noted in here in the packet, in the goals. I think the goals are terrific and we need to do them, but I think we need to ground ourselves in reality. And I think that what we need to do is we need to come up with a date when we're going to have a skeleton plan available. That's it.
Well, I know that, you know, this isn't going to be done in a year. You're looking at a 5
way.
or 10 years.
Exactly. No question.
Together.
Yeah.
And that's why I just wanted to go ahead and adopt this so we can start working on it.
And I agree.
Yeah.
Those were just observations.
Yeah. Good observations, by the way.
Mike, I have a question for you. You bought an electric car, or you drove an electric car.
Well, we made parts for those electric cars. Yep. I drove one. Yep.
And what is your take on that? I have a hard time at the end where it says update fleet purchasing and prioritizing electric vehicles. I have a hard time offering electric vehicles to our police, say, at this time.
That's
I
because you've
don't
never
think-
driven one, Sheila.
What's that?
That's because you've never driven one. I said the same
Oh,
thing
no.
about electric vehicles.
Mike,
The acceleration is terrific. The only, I mean, 0 to 60 is, it's a great, most of them have very good acceleration. The thing to remember is that they're limited in the amount of miles that they can drive between charges. But around town, the way we're looking for the police department or any of our departments driving, if you're looking at 400 mile or 450 miles or 350 miles, whatever the model is, I really think that they offer a really good opportunity for the town. I have driven them, and I was so impressed with the acceleration. I have not driven an SUV. I have only driven sedans, and so you just have to. The way I look at it, they're doing one now for a Hummer. They're doing a Hummer. So,
yeah,
so I guess I would say that they're a good bet for us.
Well, you know.
yeah.
the
I have a
department-
problem with the reliability because I'm not experienced with them.
The mechanism is simple. The motors are simple.
That's
It
what I've
depends on
read.
how many motors are on the wheel, one on each wheel or whatever, but it's the battery technology that
Well, I think
has
the big-
improved so much.
the big user we've got here in town is the police department, and they prefer four-wheel drive SUV type vehicles. So there's got to be a reconciling of what the need is with what the capabilities are. And we need to take a look at this, because I don't know what the answer is to that question.
Sheila, I've been talking with the chief. He and I've had a dialogue ongoing about this because
Who? I'm sorry, who?
The chief with Craig Sanford. And his concern at this point was just being able to retrofit them with their police gear, their radios, and they've got the cages in the back to keep
Right.
the bad people in the back and the good people in the front, and that sort of thing. So I told, and I promised him, speaking for myself here, that because I've been public a couple of times about getting a Tesla or some sort of electric vehicle, an EV, for our police department, that I wouldn't come and jam this down his throat if it wasn't something that he didn't want or didn't think would work for him. So at this point, I told him I was going to do some more research and get back to it, and I think that since this plan we're working on is to be comprehensive and to be long-term, we may not find that we purchase an EV next year, but I definitely believe in exactly what Mike says, that, EVs are wonderful vehicles, are wonderful. And when you drive them, it's not like driving a regular car. There's so many more advantages, and they are much, much more reliable because they really are much simpler than an internal combustion engine. I won't go into it all tonight because, we have other things that we have to discuss, but as soon as I can afford one, well, I could probably afford one today, but cheap me, as soon as I can save up enough money to buy one for cash, I'm going to get one myself.
Interesting.
My question is, what's your mile limit on these? Can they go 200, 300 miles a day?
No,
without
one.
being recharged?
you can go 350 to 450 depending on the model and so forth. But I mean, and the charging time now, one of the problems has been in the past, the charging time was up to 24 hours, but some of them get partially charged in a short period of time. I've got a bunch of data somewhere here that we've been looking at. I've been participating in a discussion group where it's been presented at several different meetings, and the overall time to charge has come down, and the mileage or the miles that you can drive between charges has increased. It also depends, though, on the type of driving you're doing, just like any other car. So,
I would suggest if we are going toward that, the EV purchase, that we try one and see how it works out for the police and not
Absolutely.
do a package.
oh yeah, you don't buy a fleet. You want to try them out. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But to give you some firsthand information about the charging, so I went with my buddy. He has a Tesla. I think it's the Model S, the new one, the smaller one, which isn't small by any means, and it is all-wheel drive. And I'd put it up against my F-150 and four-wheel drive any day on any conditions. But we went to a supercharging station, which are all up and down the major highways in this country, and we could install something like that at either at highway or at the police department. I don't know how much it would cost, but we charged his whole vehicle from about 18% to 90% in 10 minutes while we sat in the vehicle. It's incredible, and it will
We're
only
gonna
get
have
better.
to move this along because we've got
Yes, absolutely.
other stuff around. Is there anything else? Well, first of all, I really would like to adopt this tonight if we could. And
So
then
moved.
Second?
I have a first and a second. Okay, we'll take a roll call. Sheila,
Sure.
Pat,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Alan says aye, motion carries. So we can go back to this at another time, maybe at the next meeting, to see what else try to prioritize what we want to start to do first and whatever we can do, be able to do to kick this off. Is that good?
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys want to comment any more on this for right now, or do you want?
No, I'm good.
You guys are all good with this?
Yeah.
Okay. Discuss the 2022 budget goals. Who wants to kick that off? I just have one thing I'm just going to mention. I'll kick it off. The only thing that I would like to see this coming year is to take a look at solar for the municipal buildings. I'd like to see something like that. I don't know whether it would be able to do it or not this coming budget year, but I'd like to take a look at it anyway, if we could, money-wise, but
One
that's
of
all I have.
suggested, I believe it was Mike, that any solar that we put on the buildings, be able to be removed and put on a new building if we do get to replacing that building in the future.
Yeah, I agree.
I think we're gonna need so much money for our water department and,
Oh.
and that I would like, I mean, I like solar, that's fine.
Well,
I don't
you know,
think
there
it's all
might
that
be,
great. I
there
don't
might
think
be
it's all that
some,
great, but anyway.
but
that
there might be,
being
there
I
might be
think if we're
some,
gonna spend money, we ought to spend it there.
right, but
I think that's the most important.
I agree 100%, but what I'm trying to say is there might be some grant money out there where we might be able to get some help somewhere without, maybe not spending anything. We don't know that. That's what I'd like to look into.
That's fine.
That's what I'm looking for. But I
What
mean,
what I'd like to suggest for our recommendation for consideration is that we get Jen and Lori and anybody else who's involved. Let's understand first what the revenue implications of COVID are going to be over this next year. And I think that's going to have to guide what we do. I just think that we need to, we know revenues are down this year, and we had to take money out of reserves so we didn't affect the tax rate. So I really think what we should do is, I mean, there's all kinds of things I think we should spend money for the infrastructure. Don't get me wrong. But I think first, the practical thing we got to do this coming year is to sit down first and get the as best estimate as we can is how much our revenues are going to be impacted by COVID again, because it's going to be probably another year's worth. So that's my suggestion. And then I think once we get that in hand, then I think we can sit down and say, okay, this would be a good idea to do, or this wouldn't be, or whatever. But we got to know first what the revenue is going to be, because I don't think we want to take money out of the general fund anymore, or the reserve fund anymore
no.
and we need to maintain that balance. So it may be another belt tightening year. So let's take a look at that. That's my suggestion.
I agree with you.
I have no problem with that. Absolutely none.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Mike. You're absolutely right.
just think we need to do it.
Agreed.
So that's where I'm at. And then I'm be willing to, once we know that, I'm willing to look at anything that's reasonable. I think solar is a great idea and the other things as well. But we know we have to spend a significant amount of money for the wastewater treatment, for the
That's
wastewater.
right.
And so let's see how that all fits in this year, next year, year after, and so forth, and see what we can do with that. That's my suggestion anyway, and I'll shut up.
Anybody else have any budget goals?
No, I think Mike's right. Let's see where we are before we move too far into the future.
How about you, Pat?
No, I agree.
Okay.
So how do we get at that? How do we get at that, Lori, fairly in a, what we know it's a guesstimate at this point, but how do we get some kind of numbers like that from Jen and whoever so that we can look at it?
Yeah, well, what we have done in the past is we've done like a forecasting model, and up to 5 years, and in this case, 5 years would be challenging for us, but we could certainly do a forecast into next year in terms of salaries and debt service and, you know, the big numbers that we know. Look at the fund balance numbers we've put in and what potential valuation increase would be, and then bring that back to you in kind of a summary document.
That's all, yeah, summary, yeah. That would be great.
Okay. So we need to have a motion to adopt the budget goals, even though there is none, right? Basically.
We're just using this as feedback for right now, direction. So I think since you guys are interested in kind of seeing our financial forecast, then maybe we do that, and then
Okay.
then maybe there's more specific goals that come from that.
All right. So I guess we need a motion.
No, I'm saying I don't need a motion.
Oh, you
But if-
don't need a motion, okay.
If you want to make a motion about something, that's absolutely fine.
I don't think so.
No, I'm fine with it. Okay. Okay, discuss short, are we finished with that?
Yep.
We're finished, right? Okay. Item 7, discuss short-term rental ordinances, proposed ordinance. Tonight, we're gonna do something a little different. We're gonna go ahead and let the audience, they have to raise their hands and whatnot, talk first, and we're gonna give everybody 5 minutes to present, their questions or comments. And we won't interrupt anybody. We'll go ahead and let them talk for 5 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next person until after everybody's had their say for 5 minutes each. And then we'll try to answer some questions and the comments that they present us. I know there's a lot of people out in the audience. We do have an executive session at 7:30. So we have between now and then, I believe, to be able to go as far as we can with this tonight. So anybody out in the audience would like to start this, just raise your hand.
I have Hayward Wetzel with his hand up.
Okay?
Where'd he go? It moved. You can see at the top. I'm not sure if he went away or not. Bear with me.
He's down there, David, now. At the bottom of the hand.
All right. Hayward, I've permitted you to talk. Hayward, I've requested you unmute. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, and can you see me okay? I can't see myself on the screen.
We will not be seeing you, just hearing you.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, first of all, good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity to offer some input into this discussion. My name is Hayward Wetzel, and I've owned a short-term rental in Kennebunkport for the past 16 years. Tonight, I speak not only for myself, but for a growing number of Kennebunkport homeowners who may be affected financially by the ordinance that you're developing. My intent here is to offer constructive input to help develop an ordinance that is fair and is in the best interest of our town and taxpayers. In September, I spoke with each of you personally. Each of you who was kind enough to return my phone call. While each of you had personal opinions about regulation, the one common thing that I heard from everyone was that the town has no information about short-term rentals to guide regulation. Since you don't know who owns short-term rentals, you don't know which houses or short-term rentals, you can't really track complaints about things like noise and parking and trash collection, nor can you even have assurance that these rentals are safe. In fact, you don't even know how many short-term rentals there are in town. What I heard from you was that an ordinance is needed, first and foremost, to gather data about short-term rentals to fill these information gaps. I think everybody would agree that is a very reasonable starting point, and I'm confident that no short-term rental owner would have a problem with an ordinance that requires a simple and an easy to implement process to gather the data you need to decide what regulations are appropriate. However, your latest draft of an ordinance that was posted on the town's website this week appears to be much more far-reaching. Respectfully, along with other short-term rental owners, I would offer the following comments about this latest draft. Number one, instead of a complicated, time-consuming, and expensive licensing procedure, why not move to a simple online registration procedure as a first step? This addresses the town's desire to collect data on the number, location, and ownership of SDRs. Importantly, it would be a low-cost approach that would not increase overhead or place a large administrative burden on the town staff. And that sounds like something very important, listening to your conversation about the preparation of a budget with reduced revenues. Also, it could immediately provide for safety standards for all short-term rentals. Number two, establishing a comprehensive baseline needs to be the first step. Before creating limits on short-term rentals, we need to know how many there are. Otherwise, establishing limits is premature and it's arbitrary. Going forward, in fairness to short-term rental owners, any limits should not be lower than the existing number of registered short-term rentals. And I think that was in one of your earlier drafts, but not in the one that came out this week. Number three, the transferability of registrations needs to be fair to homeowners. The ordinance should provide for both the automatic transfer of a registered short-term rental in the event of intra-family transfers, but it also needs to provide a reasonable window for transferring an existing registration to future owners. Basically, that protects the resale value of a home that has been a short-term rental. Number four, the ordinance needs to provide for more clarification on suspensions. The process for suspension or revocation of a registration should not be arbitrary or lack materiality. The penalty should not be harsher than the complaint. And finally, keep the ordinance self-contained to ensure transparency and public input prior to enacting additional requirements. The paragraph that was added in the most recent draft, which allows the board to adopt additional regulations, should be eliminated so that how the ordinance will work will be clearly and comprehensively spelled out to homeowners and to voters when they vote on the ordinance. This regulation of short-term rentals will impact hundreds of homeowners in our town, perhaps as many as 1 in 5 homeowners, maybe even more. Income and property values, not to mention the impact on the town's primary economic driver, tourism, and even the town's tax revenues could be affected. My hope is simply that you will approach this highly controversial issue thoughtfully and allow adequate time and input from all constituencies to craft an ordinance that ultimately will protect our town's unique character, as well as the well-being of the residents, of our residents. So thank you very much for this opportunity to put forth these ideas. I'd be happy to explore them in greater detail with you with more time, as I'm sure other short-term rental owners would be happy to do the same. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Hayward. We're going to have many more meetings between now and June. So yeah, we'll be able to answer a lot of these questions for sure. But we can't answer them all tonight, but we're going to do the best we can.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, we have 5 more people currently. Sandra Sherlock White.
Okay.
Sandra, you should be able to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
So my husband and I are both homeowners as well, and we do offer our home as a short-term rental. And I do, many of the points that were made by the previous speaker, I would agree with. But I think that, there's this, tension between obviously what the individual homeowner's rights may be and what you're looking to do as a town. I do believe that the implication of, the tax revenues that the town is enjoying from this and the state, should not be overlooked. And as well, the effect that the short-term rentals in fact have on the local economy. And as the previous speaker said, our tourism industry. And I think one of the things that troubles me, and so my husband's a physician, I'm an attorney, and look at it from those two perspectives, as well as just being homeowners who really care about the town and where we all live. But, you know, there's, for one thing, as far as what my husband's point of view would be, you know, having these rentals are safer for many families who come to Kennebunkport to vacation. It's not congregate. At a time when we have a pandemic at our hands, that's something to really bear in mind. It is safer for those families, and it's safer for all the other travelers who aren't going to be in close quarters with the other travelers. So in fact, that's a really important point as far as the short-term rental goes. But as far as some of the things that I also am concerned about is that, you know, with the high property taxes that many homeowners bear, this is one way to allow homeowners to keep their homes and stay there. And it can also, in fact, increase, I think, the housing industry for the town of Kennebunkport. Finally, too, I mean, the private property rights that homeowners have can't be overlooked here. And, you know, certainly the courts have found for many years that, you know, individuals' property rights include the right to lease their property. It's an inherent incident of ownership. It's not a privilege of license. In fact, again, it's an inherent incident of ownership. We already have regulations in our town as far as noise, any nuisances, crime, et cetera, that can address what might be considered issues around whatever the nuisance factor of a short-term rental may be. And that's not to say that, again, long-term rentals or even homeowners themselves aren't nuisance factors, you know, as far as a backyard barbecue or anything else. And I think the distinction between just the short-term rentals versus something that's longer than 30 days, in fact, strikes me as being quite arbitrary. There shouldn't really be a difference in the way we treat a short-term tenancy versus a long-term tenancy. There is really no difference here. And in fact, as well, you know, versus our hotel industry, which I think there's plenty of room for the inns and the other hotels that have thrived in Kennebunkport for many, many years. So I think, you know, we really need to look closely at that. I think that if there was going to be this type of regulation, it makes much better sense to regulate, for example, people that are operating multiple short-term rental properties, as opposed to one. And many other towns, in fact, have looked at throughout the nation, regulating something, say, in excess of 6, where individual owner owns more than 6 properties. That begins to look much more like a commercial interest. These properties are being used for their residential purposes, whether the homeowner is there the entire time or there's a tenant there. There's really no difference in the use of those properties. I also have some difficulty around the inspections. I think that and the reporting requirements are really quite intrusive around privacy rights of people in their own homes.
We have 1 minute left, ma'am.
Okay, so privacy rights around people who, you know, don't necessarily want the intrusion of an inspection in their home. And in fact, again, there's plenty of law on that subject. And so I think that's a concern. And then as well, sort of the reporting of who is staying and how many people are staying. My husband is going to offer his last
Yeah, just
comments.
a quick, 10-second. I mean, the previous discussion of, the constraints on the town budget as we come out of a pandemic, I just don't think it's a great idea for the town to start limiting the number of tourists that could come in and spend their money, especially the people who actually tend to rent a house often are people who are spending more money, will contribute more to the local economy. That's all I had to say.
Well, thank you, guys.
Mhm.
Thank you.
We now have someone labeled as Galaxy S10E. Please identify yourself.
And we'd like to know their names.
Hi, my name is Kathy. I agree with
What's
Cough.
your last name? What's your
Cough.
last name?
Cough.
I think Cough, okay, thank you.
Yeah. I agree with the last two people. The only thing I wanted to add was we did send in some email questions, or two things. Email questions that we would appreciate answers to if someone could get back with us. That was Lori, I believe. No. Through Lori Smith. And if she could get back with us, I would appreciate it. And the other thing that bothered me about this is the limitation on the number of licenses that would be permitted and the renewal process every year. How do you run, if you have people that have been renting from you for 25 years, you get a license one year, but you're not guaranteed that that's going to happen in the following year. How do you tell these people, I'm sorry, you can't rent from me anymore? Then you have a mass of trying to get some other accommodations or no accommodations. And the harder you make it for people to come visit you, you're no longer the vacation land. You're, eliminating a lot of tourism, and you're making it harder for people to have properties in your area. That's about all. I know I have more time left, but I would appreciate it if somebody could get back with us on that emailed questions that we sent earlier today.
All right, well, thank you very much. Who's up next?
Next, we have James.
Hi, thanks very much. This is James.
James, can you please tell me your last name?
Yes, indeed. This is James Mason, and I have a house at Goose Rocks Beach. First and foremost, thank you guys for all of your time and energy and effort on the Board of Selectmen. It's appreciated, I think, certainly by me, and I suspect by everyone. But and a number of very good points were raised by the previous homeowners. So I won't get into too much detail, and I admittedly have not seen any of the earlier drafts, but when I looked through this document, I did have a couple of specific questions for fear of getting a little too granular. I wondered, I didn't fully understand in the definition rental accommodation was, and I wondered if that was something that somebody could answer for me, because I know in prior discussions on this topic over the past several or few years, there were some locations in and around the town of Kennebunkport, and perhaps not so much out where my house is. And then there were issues that were more directed toward the sort of rooms within a house rental as opposed to a whole house rental. So I wanted to see if I could get some clarity on whether residential rental accommodations, which is not a defined term within that definition, meant something other than a whole house rental, and whether a whole house rental was excluded. And that's really the only question I had outstanding. I want to thank the other people who spoke up, because they raised the majority of the points that I had. And I think, again, reiterating the impact to the tax base and the impact to the tourist industry, and the fact that, some of our families have been coming here since, the clocks went on the clock farm. I think, this is a pretty abrupt change to go into some sort of a licensing format. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody?
Ella,
Oh, that is exactly why. It's Stella. It's the name of my computer. I didn't realize.
oh,
Stella. So that whenever I get a phone, but I can go Stella. I was inspired when I was. So anyway, I'm really Francisca Savadier, and I have a house at Goose Rock since 1977, and it's been rented every year since then, except for this year because of obvious reasons. And I sent, as Laurie knows, I sent some comments in which are not, which are certainly very mild compared to what I've heard tonight. And so you have my comments in an email to Laurie. My main concern was this question of the limitation on the number of licenses from the point of view that I listened to the last meeting, which fortunately isn't. This one's not lasting as long. And there were several times that the point was made that the intent was not to prevent people who have been renting their houses for 30 years from renting them, again, and because they wouldn't get a license, and that the, new owners would not take, I think even Sheila said the new owners do not have priority over old owners, and there's really sort of scare. I mean, just the fact that there's nothing in the ordinance about, you're just saying that you're going to set the limits at the first meeting every year, and there's nothing about whether there's an intent to protect existing renters, like somebody, I think it was Hayward, who said something about, yeah, it is difficult to set limits without having a baseline and without knowing it. And so I am also an attorney, but I'm not a real estate attorney, so I'm not about to, I'm not going to say I agree with whatever, Sandra, but I'm not saying I disagree with her, because I really haven't studied the issue. The only thing that might make sense for the town is to avoid, if there is going to be, if people are thinking of starting litigation, I hate to see the town get stuck paying those fees like they did at Goose Rocks Beach when owners were asserting their private rights, ultimately to lose. But the litigation went on for how many years, and how much did it cost the town? And so I think it would be good to have some clarity before then, because I'm a lawyer, so I can say I hate lawyers who start up groundless litigation, including our president. And I had some really minor comments, since we haven't gotten to that stage yet, about the license deadline, or the hearing, the request 5 days to respond to a town's request. That's because you're speaking to someone who lives to travel, and therefore I could very well never get a request from the town, or I had no idea I was supposed to be responding to something in 5 days. And especially since now the post office has moved to Kennebunkport, and so my husband doesn't go and collects the mail once a week for 5 days. He may collect it less often now that it's in Kennebunkport as opposed to Cape Porpoise. So so I think that's really all I have to say, and then I would be happy to participate or discuss anything with anybody, so that we don't have any polarization in Kennebunkport like we have in the rest of the country.
So can I ask a question, man? I didn't get your name. All I
my
see
name-
is Stella, and I know that's not your name, so.
No, well, I mean, I don't love Stella. I always wanted to be Stella. I'm from New Orleans.
So-
Streetcar named Desire. So my name is Francisca, Francisca, and the last name is Sabadi, S-A-B for boy, A-D for David, I-E, and I own the house jointly with my husband. So Robert Dwyer, and we have 2 addresses. I never know which one the town wants you to use. It's like 1 Edgewood Avenue or 958 Kings Highway.
Well, thank you very much.
And so I think you've all been, I think this is, so it's interesting, but my main concern right now is, okay, but maybe, who knows, maybe it's sort of fun to use the house during the summer, since nobody, and since my husband finally retired after like 23 years at LL Bean, sort of volunteer, and so it was sort of nice. Maybe we'll want to rent it again. On the other hand, I may want to travel.
Well, you have a good evening.
And I
You
find
must
out
be-
that I missed a public hearing, because I was,
You must be fun in a courtroom.
I am, and I'm actually very good at real estate law. I just got the assessed value of my house in New Orleans reduced by 1/3, and I have to call up all the real estate agents who have promised me very nice lunches and dinners, because they were convinced I would never get it reduced by a cent. And so now, actually, if I put my mind to it, I could third a lot of. I mean, I know that because there's been a lot of regulation, and I don't know what the other towns are doing, but you read the article, even, I'm not sure what happened in Portland. They were against short-term rentals. First I thought they won, but now I think they lost or whatever. But, where people are trying to restrict Airbnbs, they did that in New Orleans in the French Quarter, I think sort of for the same reasons, because people don't want people going down and having and making a nuisance, and you think you have a house. And so I can see that they're on both sides, but it's true. I remember once last week somebody said, "Hey, listen, owners don't want to have bad renters," and that's for sure. So,
Well, you have a good evening. Your time is up.
okay, you too.
Please see us again at the
I
next
will.
meeting.
This is the second meeting I've attended. It's sort of fun. And I have a friend who stayed at the One Line Lodge because the lodge at Turbot's Creek was closed and loved it and talked about violating social distancing
So-
for wild parties in that bar every night. She said all the natives were there. I mean,
Who's up? Thank you very much. Who's up next?
Okay.
We have Colin Cuskley.
Yes, hello.
Hello, how you doing?
Good. My name is Colin Cuskley. I appreciate the board looking at this issue, especially given the difficulty and importance of getting it done under the current circumstances. We recently purchased a property in Kennebunkport, and we plan to be full-time residents. And from hearing this meeting and the last one, I think maybe that group's a little underrepresented in the comments, mostly people who are renting their places out. We do not plan to do that, but have discovered the house next to us is a short-term rental, and we are up in a neighborhood near the golf course that would not, I think, commonly be thought of as a short-term rental neighborhood. So I might want to give a little different perspective at some point in the future, but for now, I just wanted to start off and say, and I've been in contact with Ms. Smith about this, as a retired IT guy, I kind of have a hobby still of doing things with websites, and I've been able to scrape off of Airbnb and VRBO, mostly, some data that I'm not sure that the board has had from the previous comments. And I found there are about 300 short-term rental units listed on those two websites, plus 3 others, about 270 on Airbnb and VRBO, another 30 on 3 other websites, a lot of overlap also between those websites that I filtered out. And I think this is consistent with some data that the town has gotten from third-party vendors of approximately 300 short-term rentals. I suspect from looking at the data that this may underrepresent Goose Rocks, which I know is a popular area for rentals, and possibly Cape Porpoise. So I will personally want to take a look myself at some of the one agent up there, particularly, I think, that may do a lot of the rentals. And maybe some of the more of the rentals up there are people that are repeating year after year, or word of mouth rentals. So I'm not sure, but I think it is a good objective to pass this ordinance to at least get a registration of all the properties and get a handle on where they are and how many you have. In looking at the data, I also found there are maybe 3 dozen or more units that I would say by their description would overlap with accessory apartments or residential rental accommodations as defined in the land use ordinance. And so I'm not sure how this ordinance is going to intersect with that. And indeed, the land use ordinance, I think this is something more for the future. If you go looking at a second round, I heard comments in a previous meeting that, perhaps after a year or two, seeing how this operates, you'd have to revisit it. But even the land use ordinance really doesn't have any definition in it of permitted uses of rental or short-term rentals or anything, though, of course, as a previous speaker pointed out, there are certain property rights that people, are allowed to rent units out. So that was my first comment, mostly was, about some of the data, and I think there could be ways of getting a little better handle on the dating before passing a regulation. It would seem to me there couldn't be, given the numbers I got. I heard numbers of 500 or more, but it would seem to me you'd have to be in the 300 or 400 number range, because I don't see how people are renting out if they're not advertising on the web these days. And I have heard comments of it being 40% of the properties in Kennebunkport, but I have not been able to find, even in the long-term plan, what are the number of residential units in Kennebunkport. If the, say, 500 was 40%, then you'd have just something over 1,000 properties, but I assume you've got more than that, I would believe. So I'll contact Ms. Smith about that. And also about some other issues that I have. I'll try to put them in writing to her. Not so much issues as I would say comments, but I appreciate the time and I appreciate the work you guys are doing on this, and hope you reach a acceptable solution for most everybody. Thank you.
Colin,
Yes.
I have a question for you. How did you feel when you learned that your neighbor had a rental? The fact that you bought.
We were aware of it during the purchase process.
Okay.
We have relatives, our children and grandchildren live in Kennebunk next door. And so we have relatives in the area. We're familiar with the area. We're from the Northeast, not Maine originally. So we did our homework and kind of knew we had.
Okay. Thank you.
But we were not particularly happy. That was, I should say, in considering purchasing, it didn't stop us from purchasing, but from my point of view, would somewhat reduce our property value up in that neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Peter Mills.
Good evening, thank you.
Good evening.
We have a family home in Goose Rocks and have been there for about 20 years. And we do rent out during the course of the summer some. And mostly, I would be interested in starting with the question. I haven't been privy to the prior meetings, but what's bringing this to the surface at this point in time? And in conjunction with that, my concern is relative to really three different aspects of the ordinance as it's currently proposed, and those center around complexity, ambiguity, and asking about what is an appropriate burden to place on a homeowner. And so, for example, on the ambiguity side, the discussion about a limit of rental units and leaving that completely open from a discretionary standpoint, rather than having some level of specificity relative to how an appropriate limit would be determined and what would be considered. Some of the complexity, I look at the requirement to provide a plan relative to fire extinguishers, location, smoke detector locations, and question why the focus isn't on the existence of those items rather than the specific location of them. Another example would be specifying an evacuation plan for a home. I wonder how many of us have those for our own homes. I can see if you have a labyrinth within an office complex and are looking as a matter of life safety to help people get out and have rendezvous points where people would, as part of a team, rally up to make sure that those team members are out of the building. I also worry about the voting on an ordinance that can then be changed by regulation without due process here. Mostly, I'm in agreement with the points that others have raised earlier relative to property rights, to the ability to continue. We don't advertise our property. We rely on people that are either known to us or recommendations from people that have rented to us. And so I'd like to conclude that with coming back around to just asking for some additional insight into what's driving this process now, so that I could more formally put my thoughts in an email to the board.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
And would someone care to respond to the underlying drivers of positing this at this point in time?
We can go out, we'll address that, try to address that after everyone is finished talking at the
Great.
end. If we have the time, we definitely will. Yeah, I made a note of it.
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah.
Yes, hello. This is Kathleen
Uh,
Canarum. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, I was just made aware of the changes that you're considering. And there are two things that I just want all homeowners to think about, regardless of which side of the issue that you're on. I know of many instances, folks that I know in town, they may have intended to buy a home to live in permanently, but things can change. Take, for instance, someone that I know that came down with a very serious case of cancer and had to spend a lot of time in Boston. So you may need to relocate for financial reasons, for medical reasons. I know another woman who had to go and take care of her mother who was terminally ill. So in cases like that, an asset like your house, you would like to be able to get some income in to cover your expenses during a time like this. It's an asset that you've put, your life savings in, you've paid for it. You should be able to rent that out on a short-term basis and not have to sell your home. So I just want people to think about that. You may think your life is perfect. I will never, have to rent my house. But there could be times when your life could change. Also, there's many instances where families have inherited a house and they can't live there because they live in another town, but they'd like to keep their parents' house and visit. And this will help defray, expenses for them. They may not be able to afford the upkeep and the taxes, but having it rented for, a few weeks or a few months could help them keep the beloved family home. So just a few things to think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And the last hand we have up is Paulette.
I can't hear. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
You can hear me now. All right, Wayne Burbank. I live down in Goose Rocks, and we bought a place here in 1993, and we rented it out we didn't live all that far away, about 30 miles away, but we rented it winter and summer to help pay for it for 10 years. And to landing boat school students and UNE students. And for the most part, we had good tenants. We had one problem with one tenant and was taken care of real quick. But, I know a lot of people down here at Goose Rocks that they wouldn't be able to live here if they couldn't rent their place to help pay the taxes. I mean, the taxes certainly are not going down. And I haven't really kept up on this. I've got a thing in the online here that says for the third time in about 5 years, the Board of Selectmen is trying to regulate and license short-term rentals in town. And then I'd like to know what prompted this. Did they have a lot of complaints about parking and noise and everything? I mean, there's people all around me here, across the street and back of me and so forth, that I know if they couldn't rent their place, they wouldn't own it. They couldn't afford it. But I don't intend on renting my place again. But I mean, it could come an instance where you might have to. But the other thing I don't understand is why you're putting a cap. Why you're proposing to put a cap on rentals. So in other words, it's like a lottery. You got 100 people, but the 101st person can't rent theirs because 100 is the cap. That doesn't make sense to me. But, many people this year did not rent because of COVID. And one of them, my brother-in-law, comes every summer with all of his kids. He lives in Florida, and they've been doing this for 7 or 8 years, and they just love it here in the summer. And because of COVID, they didn't come this year. I think their place was not being rented. But and the other thing is, if a lot of these places are not rented, a lot of the landlords or the property owners are going to be without all that money to pay their taxes. So there's going to maybe be a lack of money coming into the town coffers, a lack of tax money. But I can see having a regulation where maybe each rental unit has to pay a small fee to be inspected. Initially anyway, I wouldn't say it every year, but every few years or whatever, for life safety features, life safety factors like fire alarms and smoke alarms and fires, fire extinguishers and all that, and egress and all that sort of thing. That makes sense to me. I mean, you don't want something to happen like happened in Portland, a few years back where there was 6, 7 people killed. But, for the most part, we've had renters around us here at Goose Rocks that, once in a while, if they're here for a week or 2 weeks, they'll have a loud party at night. It might go on till 10 o'clock, maybe 11 o'clock, but it's only for a short period of time. I mean, for the privilege of me living here, I can put up with somebody making a little bit of noise one night a week or one night a year or something, and the police should have, if they're being a nuisance and causing problems with parking and all that sort of thing, that there should be some regulations that police can come down and, read them the riot act, or the homeowner has to pay a fine, or if it gets bad enough and it's time and time again, take their license away or take their privilege of renting away. But so many people that I know down here depend upon that rental income. I don't know how the town can even consider. This thing that I've got in the mail here says there has been a strong push by certain members of the board for short-term rental regulations. Anybody want to step forward and say, I don't know what the certain members are, but what is the reason? What is the reason this has come up?
We'll answer that at the end of this. We'll try to answer that at the end of this, after everybody's finished talking.
Good. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And we have Paul Hogan with his hand up. Paul, you should be able to speak now.
There we go. Sorry. I was just surprised in the latest draft. I thought there was an understanding from the last meeting in terms of numbers that because we didn't have good data, we couldn't set a number, even if we wanted to cap, say, at the 2020 or 2019 level. And yet the current draft came back with.
I'm sorry. I hit a bad mouse button. There you go, Paul.
Oh, sorry. Did you hear anything?
No.
Yes. Just read the last sentence.
The
Way to
last
go.
we heard, Paul, was when you were talking about the last draft was about setting a number and then now the new draft.
I'm sorry.
What happened?
I botched him again. I'm trying to lower his hand and it keeps moving around on me. I will refrain from doing that. I don't know if Paul's here anymore. Give me a minute. There he is. All right.
Oh, wait,
Third time's the charm.
I have to unmute myself again.
There you go.
So as drafted, it would seem like regardless of the numbers of people who registered, the number could be set on January 1 next year. And the number could be reduced. If members of the board suddenly decided that 400 was too much, then it could be 300. And the earlier drafts said that it could not be reduced. And that seemed to be sensible, like you'd find out how many there were, and if you wanted to cap them, then you would cap them, and you would try to protect and preserve property rights. So that's kind of a question and comment on why that changed from the last draft. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else?
We now have Lisa with her hand up and Kathy Baker with her hand up. I will allow Lisa to talk. Lisa, you should be able to speak now.
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
First of
Can
all,
you-
I'd like to thank you. Thank you all in particular for moving this item up earlier on the agenda because as you heard this evening, there certainly is a lot of interest and concern.
Lisa,
Like
could you tell us your last name?
Miller.
Thank
So
you.
our house is at 4 Henchy Way at Goose Rocks Beach. So just a couple of points. Like many others at Goose Rocks, we have a long family history of coming to the beach. My husband's family has been coming since 1959. They rented, his parents retired there in the late 70s. We're lucky to buy in when they did because they were a family of very little means. And we were fortunate enough to inherit the property, but not to inherit any funds for which to maintain the property or pay the taxes. So we too rent our property to help cover the expenses and to preserve our family's access to the beach that's been going on for so long. So while there's been a lot of changes at Goose Rocks with wealthy families moving in from away, there are many of us that are long timers that would like to stay and need to be able to rent in order to be able to afford to stay. With regard to noise complaints, the one thing I would ask is that the town should be considering this with regard to all properties, because I could have a neighbor with a house with 5 bedrooms and college kids in there pulling a rager that don't rent. And why short-term rentals should be treated differently than any other resident of Kennebunkport is beyond me. So if there are issues, I think that any issues with regard to not being a good neighbor should be applied to all the residents and homeowners of Kennebunkport and not just those of short-term rentals. I'm part of a group that's absolutely interested in working with the town to try to find a reasonable accommodation. I think we have to have data first. To make regulations and ordinance absent data and understanding what the baseline is premature. So Hayward did a great job outlining the points. I think once we have a baseline, then we can know what the issue is. I also think the town is really undervaluing the economic impact of short-term rentals to the overall town's tax base, the businesses, not only the retail shops, but the restaurants, as well as other food purveyors. Because from our experience in renting, our renters don't use the kitchen. It's very obvious that they don't use the kitchen and that they frequent the restaurants more so than many other guests. And because they're there for a longer period of time, they have a greater economic impact. And I'd be concerned that if Kennebunkport took a more restrictive stance towards short-term rentals, they'd just be pushing the business out of Kennebunkport and down towards Wells and Agunquit. And it's a long drive from Kennebunkport to Agunquit. So your businesses would definitely be negatively impacted. You're not going to leave from the south part of Wells and drive to Kennebunkport to have dinner. It's a long way, particularly if you decide that you'd like to have a cocktail or two. So I appreciate all the hard work. I know that this is a challenging issue for the town, and I definitely think that there is a way forward that can meet the town's desires to have a handle on how many rentals we have in the community, understand what the impact is, create a simple and fair solution for gathering data, ensuring the safety of the rentals for the population, and making it a low-cost option for the town to regulate, as opposed to one that would burden the town staff. Because if you have 500 short-term rentals, there's no way in heck that there's a reasonable method for you to inspect and regulate and license all those. My last point is that the current draft of the ordinance prohibits any advertising. Many of us are either online or working through private realtors such as Beechwood. So our property is listed with Beechwood. We are advertising now, and you are the way the ordinance is drafted, we're all going to be in violation of the ordinance from day one, because there is no look back provision. So that's a very serious concern as drafted. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Kathy Baker. Kathy, you should be able to speak now.
She's muted.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, I wasn't sure. So I'm Kathy Baker, and I'm the rental manager for Kennebunk Beach Realty. And I am also the secretary for Northeast Vacation Rental Professionals. And it used to be Professionals of Maine, and now we have it for the Northeast. Now, what we do is the real estate, we have guidelines that we have to follow when we do rentals. And I know that you're talking about doing inspections, and we do that when you are going through a real estate company. We go in there and we make sure that they have the fire smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, that, you know, has radon testing, extinguishers. So we go through the property and we make sure for emergencies that they're all in compliance. And also, if we go to a property and, you know, there's a lot of times people go to properties and they want to rent them, but we know that they're not a registered apartment. We don't rent. You know, we tell them, because we can go online and we can see that they are not registered. That it's not an apartment, that they have just added a room or whatever. But we try to, you know, we follow all the stipulations of the town, and we try to help our property owners, because like it was said earlier tonight, a lot of these, they've inherited the property, so they have these high taxes. They look for the rental income for the summer and for the winter, because a lot of these summer rentals become winter rentals, and that income helps them with the taxes and upkeep of the property. And they can't do it on their own. So that's a really big impact. And also, if we start doing away with short-term rentals or cutting them back, it's going to have a big impact on all the independent contractors we have here in town that, you know, they help with all the properties, the plumbers, the electricians, all the businesses in town, the restaurants. That is extra money that they look for the revenue and the growth of the improvements of the town. And when you were saying about numbers, about 6 years ago, we came, the state said that all rentals needed to have radon test if it was less than 100 days. And they are all registered within Augusta. They have to all be registered in the state of Augusta. So we can get those numbers from the state. Part of the organization that we belong to, we hire a lobbyist to go and help us gain information, and vacation rentals accounted for 14% of the total lodging in the state of Maine, which is 908,320,000 in the state of Maine in 2019. And we had 37 plus million overnight visitors, and 1 in 5 homes in Maine is a vacation rental, which is approximately 751,000 housing units in Maine. And the preliminary numbers for 2020 is 19% of all homes in Maine are vacation homes. In Vermont, it's 17%. New Hampshire, it's 12%. So we're number 1, being the highest for vacation home rentals. Like I was saying earlier, this organization, we hire lobbyists who help keep the taxes down. They wanted to raise the sales tax to 10%, and we are able to have this lobbyist help us. And I spoke in Augusta, and then some of my counterparts spoke, because we want our vacation renters to come here. But if they're paying $10,000 for a home and they're paying, 10% tax, that's a lot of tax. So we want to keep it down. And
You have 1 more minute, ma'am.
Yep. Okay. So we understand, and we appreciate all the time and energy that the selectmen are putting into this. But I agree that we should just try to find out how many rentals you might have and gather that data before we go into a, this whole draft of doing a license on all rentals. I don't think that we need to have a license, but we can provide the data to you to give you what the town wants. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more hands up?
There's one more.
Linda Burford. I will allow her to talk. Linda, if you can unmute yourself, you should be able to talk. Digitally ask Linda to unmute 3 times. Linda's the last person with her hand up, but she is not unmuting herself. Oh, now we have a phone number that has a hand up. I'll move on to that and see if Linda can unmute herself later.
Okay.
So I'm unmuting a telephone number that ends with 1957.
Hello, this is Katie Presley. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, we can.
I am the proud owner with my husband of 38 Main Street, which is known as the Cup and Saucer Home, which we're honored to buy from the Litchfields. And of course, we have just felt very honored for the last 12 years being owners. And I agree with a lot and most of what everyone said before me. Two things, I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. Two things that come to my mind is one, anyone who is smart enough to purchase a beautiful home is going to take care of it. And we rent our home as well. And we are very good stewards, and we leave a note saying, welcome to our home, treat this as your own. And we take great pride, and we've had just wonderful families visit our home over the last 12 years. And I follow up with them. A lot of them do come back. And there is a wonderful a monitoring system that the VRBO does. They do ask you when tenants leave, are you happy with them? Would you have them rent again? And you rate them. And there's only been, I think, 2 times when I have said I would never rent to these people again. So I think the owners of these homes are, they don't want anyone, they won't allow people to come in and just be disrespectful and, do anything damaging in noise or, property or whatever. So we take pride. I think most everyone who owns these homes takes a great deal of pride in the maintenance and keeping up and monitoring who comes in and out. So that was one thing I was going to say, the monitoring that the VRBO does, they ask you after each person. And the second thing is, it seems to me with when you own a home, of course, our desire is to have our children own it, our grandchildren, and keep it in the family. And in doing so, they will have to, have the carrying cost raised with rental income. However, they all feel that Kennebunkport is their second home. My daughter was married there. And so we have a lot of vested memories in Kennebunkport. But we wouldn't be able to continue that down the road if they would not be allowed to do that. And it seems to me, if I saw in the ordinance that family members, if you pass it into the family line, that remains the same if I read it correctly. But it seems to me if you have a short-term rental designation on your home, that, as that lady was saying before, whoever knows down the road what could happen. And if it has to leave your family, even though you didn't design it to do that, it should be grandfathered in. And that should be something that's designated in the title of the house, as grandfathering in as protection for down the road. God forbid if anything happens and the children and grandchildren can't take care of it and in the manner in which it should be taken care of. So those really were my only two additional points about the monitoring of VRBO as well as the grandfathering in. And that means not just for family members, but the ability to rent going forward. And I think that's all, but thank you all for your time and the consideration and all these viewpoints. And I'm sure I'm a very positive person that we can accomplish this without a lot of regulations. I'm not a person that is fond of a lot of regulations because I think people are inherently wanting to take care of their own properties. Okay, thank you. Night,
Thank you.
night.
Good night. Do we have Linda back yet or not?
Blue hands raised, the person we had problems with has disappeared.
Okay.
So, last call.
Last call for hands.
There are no more hands.
Okay, so does anybody want to comment on some of these comments these people brought forward?
I think I do. Can I?
Sure.
I took notes from everybody, and I'm not going to go through all of the comments. I've got 7 pages worth, but what I've tried to do as I went along was to summarize what I think came up as the important comment.
We only have about, Mike, we only have like about 5 or 6 minutes. So.
Yeah, well, these are I've only got a couple of things. I'm not going to talk about each of them. I'm just going to tell you what they are, and we need to respond at the next whatever.
Right.
Okay. So
I think what we can do, we'll let you do this, and then, but
okay.
I made a lot of notes too, so we can put them all together, kind of, sort of, and then when we come back to the next meeting, we'll have some answers for them. Or maybe we can go ahead and email some of these people.
Well, I think we need to tell them tonight too, that what the common items were, so we can talk, but.
Well, go ahead.
Do what you want. You're the chair.
Go ahead.
All right. Why now? Data, transferability, license limitations, and safety items. That's it.
Yeah, that's that's what I have as far as notes.
Basically.
The only other thing,
There's other things, but that's me, the common ones.
and my only other comment is, and I go right back to where I started, because we have zoning, and this is with any place, if you're going to rent your home, you're doing business. Therefore, why do we have residential areas? Residential areas are not supposed to be areas that allow businesses. And, I'm speaking as a property owner. When all of this COVID started, the homes that do rent were renting to Massachusetts people, to New York people, to New Jersey people. When our governor said that that they were not allowed to come to our state. So, as a property owner, to me, that was not safe. That's my only comment.
So I've got one thing I want to talk about, and that is people being able to inherit the property. And I think that a son or a daughter should be able to do that, whether they inherit it or whether they buy it. I think that license should probably go with the house if they do that. But I mean, if you stretch it out into uncles and aunts and cousins and nephews, I think that's the wrong path to take on it. But as far as the sons and daughters, I think would be a great thing to do, to be able to let them do that.
And one more comment, and I meant to mention that, Mr. Colin Cuskley mentioned it, that he bought his home, didn't realize that his next door neighbor was renting it. And somebody made a comment that if you have a license, you might be able to get more money if and when you sell. Well, what happens to the homeowner next door who would like to sell his house, but when they find out that all the homes on the street are rental homes, then their property value goes down. That's a point.
But we also we just, the town just taxes the house. It does not tax the license. And the license, if it went with a house, as if you have one now, it's for there forever, we don't tax the licenses. So I don't see how you can let that license go with the house at all, period, except for passing it down to the sons or the daughters or whatever, or let them buy it.
If we allow the licenses to be transferable, Alan, then we would be creating artificial value in a property.
Right, absolutely.
And we can't do that.
So what you're saying, Alan, is we don't assess a house a higher value because they would have a license.
We never have done any of that.
Okay, that's what, I understand.
So anybody else want to answer any of these other questions?
I've already answered a lot of these, and people either haven't listened, or perhaps some of them are new. So I think I'll wait until the next iteration, because I'm sure we'll hear many questions again.
I think the question of why, has been asked several times tonight, and it might be helpful for the board to give a couple sentences in that regard.
For me, and I am one of the ones who brought this forward, so if you'd like to burn me in effigy and goose rocks, you can come over and take me for measurements if you like. But, being a lifelong resident of the town, yes, there have been some form of short-term rentals here for as long as I've been here. And that's okay. And even what we have today is okay. But if we don't get a handle on it today, what people tell me, and of course we hear from all the people who are the short-term renters, the owners of the properties, and I have been myself. I own multiple properties in Kennebunkport. But what bothers me is that one day we might wake up and I might not know the neighbors on either side of my house, because they're just going to be short-term rentals. And the beauty of living in this town, and many of you obviously don't live here, and I hope that someday you will be able to live here year-round and truly experience the town, because if you're only here for a couple of weeks or the summer, you haven't really experienced Kennebunkport. If we become a town that just caters to tourism and to short-term renters, and we don't protect our year-round community, then what's the sense? Why do any of the five of us sit on this board? And I do realize that I try to represent the people who are not only, who are the taxpayers in general, not just those who are the residents and the voters. But I've heard a lot from people who are tired of their neighbors' houses being sold and just turned into rental properties. So there is I hate this term, silent majority, but there are people out there who have the exact opposite feelings of many of the people who phoned in tonight.
And there are other issues. I mean, we need to know, for one thing, how many short-term rentals they are, who owns them, safety issues, how many, what's that?
Trash pickup. When I was renting short-term rentals in my own properties, you wouldn't believe the amount of trash. I don't know. People go on vacation and the amount of trash, and this isn't anecdote, this is fact. I've seen it with my own eyes. If I lived when I lived in one of the properties, my wife and I and daughter might generate 2 barrels a week. I had to put out 5 or 6 a week for the same amount of people in the same house.
And you have to also remember that these are actual businesses, even though they want to make the money to pay the taxes and everything else, or one thing or another. These are actually businesses in residential communities. And so they do need some form, I feel, as some type of a regulation to be able to know, like I just said, who owns them, how many short-term rentals do we have, safety issues all the way around. There's a lot of reasons why we need to know what's going on.
And furthermore, one last thing that I want to say is, it is not my intent to stop anybody who is renting today or rented last year. And I think somebody brought up a very good point. When we do look at these, if this ordinance does come to fruition, maybe 2020 is not the year we want to look back on people and say, did you rent your property? But, a history of we can work that out. But I don't want to, let's just say for argument's sake, there's 500 rental units in Kennebunkport today. I don't want to reduce that number, but what I don't want to see is in 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 years that there's 1,000. Because when I started renting short-term in 2005 in Cape Porpoise, according to, I believe it was called Home Away at that time, there were 11. And I dare say there's a lot more than that today. You go on to the VRBO, which I think is what replaced them, their website. There's a lot more than 11 in Cape Porpoise alone.
Well, when that happens, you lose your sense of the community, because it's not, you don't know who your neighbor is half the time, and you want that community spirit, and if it gets to be, if there's too many, and we don't know what that number is, but when you're getting up around right now, I believe it's like between 250 and 350, and it's like you just said, Ed. If it goes to 700 or 800 without any regulation whatsoever, and it's too much of a good thing. Any more comments?
No, I agree with both you and Ed. And my main concern is that I'm a native Mainer. I've lived here most of my life, and I moved here into Kennebunkport, which is where my family was originally from, this area, in '99. And what I've seen since 1999 is the lights go out in the wintertime up here, unless there's a winter rental, and they used to be all occupied by people who lived here year round. And now there are probably 2 or 3 people up and down here that live here year round, maybe 4. And the rest of them have turned into very expensive rentals. And so there are no neighbors. There's a couple of neighbors, but most of them are now being turned in. And if you go up you can go up, I don't live on Langsford Road, but if you go up Langsford Road, you take a look at Langsford Road, that's all turning that way. Sheila lives up there, she knows. It's all turning into short-term rentals, condos, et cetera, people come and go, and the neighborhoods are being, in my estimation, destroyed. And people that live in Florida and own these places, or they live in Georgia, or they live somewhere else, they come here for a few weeks out of the year. Well, we live here year round. We don't go south in the winter, and other people here in the street, the people that are still here, live here year round. And people are buying the houses and making them into short-term rentals. And it just does, and I'm not taking any shots at the people at Goose Rocks Beach. That's probably gone on for years and years and years, but the neighborhoods are changing. And we've talked so much about we need to get younger people moving into town, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's very, very difficult because these properties are going, it's an expensive community, I realized. But property is going for a very high number. People are renting them, and they might come here 2 or 3 times a year. The people that they bought them from made out well. But now what we've got is changing neighborhoods in town, and I don't think it's good for the town. It's stunning the amount of change that's happened since 1999. I don't know what happened before 1999, but it's stunning.
It is. You're absolutely right, Mike. I agree with just exactly what you just said.
So now we don't even know who owns these things. You know, I got right up and down the street, people, who are they? Where they live? What if there's a problem? You know, what happened? Nothing. No, there's nobody there. The lights are all dark. It's incredible this time of year now. We're destroying the neighborhoods, basically.
Any other call?
That's my piece. But I also want to say, I really, really appreciate everybody's input. There's some valid input tonight. There's been valid input before. And I think we've got a lot to think about. And I think, you know, compromise is not a sign of weakness. So I think we need to take a look at the comments that have all been made. And we need to come up with some kind of a resolution that, as people have said, they can live with and we can live with. So, I think we can do it.
There was a lot of good comments tonight.
There were.
I think this was a good meeting.
There was a lot of concern and I appreciate all of the comments.
Yeah. Anybody else?
This is not a zero-sum game. We're going to work our way through this.
Okay, so I guess that's all for the short-term rental properties tonight. So we'll see. Other business? We have some other business. Anybody? Sheila?
I'll just mention that we are going to start decorating for Prelude. Prelude isn't going to be what it usually is, but we are definitely having Prelude. We're decorating the town to the hilt. There will be some fun stuff going on, but nothing that's going to draw a crowd. And we look forward to maybe this year having more locals participate, because I often hear that they don't because of there's just too many people. So this could be a good chance for our locals to take advantage of the beauty of our town.
Wearing a mask.
Wearing a mask. How about you, Mike? Do you have anything to add?
No, I'm good.
Pat?
No, I'm good also.
Ed?
Nope, thank you.
Laurie? Any other business for you?
I just want to let people know that this year we will be doing the Holiday Trail of Lights. So we're working with businesses and residents who would like to adopt a nonprofit and decorate their property. And we will have voting taking place during the month of December. So if people participate, they can sign up by going to the trailoflightsme.com, which will be live very soon. And people can buy votes for $5 a piece and then submit those to the property of their choice, you know, partnered with the nonprofit. Those funds will go to the nonprofit, and there will be a $500 prize for the one that wins the most votes at the end of December. So it's a great way for people to do something COVID safe, so they can drive around with family and look at all the lights and decorations in our 3 communities. But it's also a great way to help raise money for the nonprofits in our area who have had a real challenge this year. So there'll be more information coming out in the next day or so. And if you have a nonprofit you'd like to partner with, then, you know, get working on your ideas.
Is that it?
Very good.
That was a good one. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, approve the November 12th, 2020 treasurer's warrant.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first and a second. I'm going to go ahead and take a roll call. Sheila?
Yep.
Ed?
Yes.
Pat?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Alan says aye. Motion carries. So now we're going to have to go into an executive session. So we should go, Laura, should we go ahead? I know we're going to go into another screen, another Zoom, but do we want to go ahead and someone make the motion now and then sign off? Okay. 7:30. Well, let's see. It's 7:41. Executive session per MRSA 1 405-3 6E, for consultation with town attorney to discuss legal rights and duties. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a first.
Second.
Do I have a second? Okay, I'm gonna take a vote. We'll take a vote on that? Yeah, okay. Sheila,
Aye.
Ed?
I abstain. I'm not
That's right,
part of
you,
the session.
that's right,
Yeah,
that's
I've
correct.
Excuse myself from this.
Okay, Pat,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Alan says aye, motion carries. So I want to thank everybody. We won't be coming back on this Zoom meeting. We're going to be done. We're going to be moving over to an executive session under another Zoom meeting. So see you later. Thank you.
Night.